I thought the brand new pickup truck would be the final bridge between my father and me. But the glass he raised at his birthday dinner shattered 20 years of hope. The next morning, I didn't just take back the vehicle, I reclaimed the right to my own story. By our final dinner, he was the one being raised in a toast, not for celebration, but for judgment. My name is Kira Duval. At 34, I am the strategy lead for Meridian Pixel, a sharp, ascendant marketing firm in downtown Denver. I build narratives for a living, crafting campaigns that connect brands to people through carefully engineered emotional pathways. My own life, however, was built on a foundation of silence. I grew up in the quiet, sprawling suburbs of Tulsa, Oklahoma. My mother was the warmth, the color, the sound in our small house. When a sudden illness took her before I turned 12, she took all of that with her. I was left with my father, Graham Porter. He was a maintenance engineer, a man of quiet precision, and a discipline as unbending as steel. He wasn't unkind, but his love was expressed through structure and expectation, never through words. My childhood became a relentless pursuit of measurable success. I collected perfect report cards, science fair ribbons, and debate team trophies like they were currency. I'd place a first-place certificate on the kitchen counter and wait. He would look at it, nod, and say, "That's what you're supposed to do." I never once heard the words, "I'm proud of you, Kira." It wasn't a phrase in his vocabulary. Love wasn't a feeling to be shared, it was a duty to be fulfilled through excellence. After Mom died, the silence in the house grew thick enough to choke on. Our lives were governed by schedules posted on the fridge, schoolwork spread on the dining table, and the quiet hum of the television in the evening. There was no shared grief, no conversation about the gaping hole she'd left. I learned to convert my need for affection into a series of achievable goals. I commodified my longing for a father's hug into a 4.0 GPA. I translated my desire for his praise into an early acceptance to a good college. Each achievement was a silent plea, and each was met with the same stoic approval. It was a transaction that left me perpetually in emotional debt. Last Thanksgiving, during our stilted, obligatory phone call, something shifted. He was complaining, a rare indulgence for him. The transmission on his old pickup was slipping again. It was a 20-year-old machine, battered and rusted, a relic from a time when my mother was still alive. Then, for the first time in years, a different tone entered his voice. He mentioned seeing a commercial, a GMC Sierra 1500. He described it with an uncharacteristic, almost boyish flicker of excitement, speaking of the midnight blue paint and the way it looked under the dealership lights. In that single, unguarded moment, I saw a crack in the fortress. It was a glimpse of a man who still wanted something, who could still dream. That was it. That was the opening I had been waiting for my entire life. This would be my final grand gesture, the ultimate achievement. I wouldn't just earn his approval, I would gift wrap his dream and deliver it to his doorstep. His 60th birthday was less than a year away. The decision was immediate and absolute. I would take the substantial bonus I was due to receive from work and redirect it entirely. For the next 11 months, there would be no vacations, no new clothes, no expensive dinners with friends. Every spare dollar, every small luxury, would be sacrificed and funneled into one singular goal, buying my father the truck he never allowed himself to want. I would buy his pride, and in doing so, maybe I could finally buy my own peace. In my world, every significant objective begins with a spreadsheet. The morning after that Thanksgiving call, I opened a new file and named it Project Sierra. The internal code name was Truck Fund. I built a detailed tracker with columns for income, fixed expenses, and a new aggressive savings line item. I set weekly KPIs, color-coding cells, green for met targets and red for shortfalls. My social life, my wardrobe budget, my morning latte, they were all line items to be zeroed out. This wasn't just saving money, it was the execution of a strategic campaign. The deliverable was my father's happiness, and the ROI would be finally a tangible sign of his affection. My first operational call was to High-Mesa Motors in Tulsa. A cheerful, efficient salesman named Tyrell answered. I explained the situation: a surprise 60th birthday gift, top-of-the-line model, specific delivery window. I do this kind of thing all the time, he said, his voice crackling with genuine enthusiasm. We'll make it perfect. I felt a surge of relief. Tyrell became my man on the inside. We scheduled the final delivery for the evening of the party, ensuring the truck would be detailed, gassed up, and waiting. The next phase was reconnaissance. I couldn't ask my father for the exact specifications without tipping him off, so I activated a dormant asset, Walt, his oldest friend. Walt had been a fixture in our lives, a gruff but kind presence who fished with my father on Saturdays. I called him under the guise of wanting to send my dad some new fishing gear for his birthday. We chatted for a few minutes about the weather in Denver before I casually pivoted. Dad mentioned his old truck was giving him trouble, I said, my voice carefully pitched to sound like passing curiosity. Does he ever talk about what he'd get if he won the lottery? Walt chuckled. Oh, you know your dad. He'd never spend it on himself, but yeah, he's been mooning over those new GMCs. He saw one down at the dealership. Dark blue, he said it was the color of the sky over Keystone Lake right after sunset. Bingo. Midnight blue, I typed into my notes. Does he still tow that old boat of his? I asked. Every chance he gets, Walt replied. He said he'd need one with the proper trailering package, you know, for the ramp. The intelligence was perfect. I thanked Walt, promising to send a gift card for Bass Pro Shops for his trouble. The next day, I called Tyrell back and finalized the order, a GMC Sierra 1500 AT4 crew cab in midnight blue metallic. I added the tow package Walt mentioned, then began layering on the unspoken desires, the comforts my father would never admit to wanting. The interior would be jet black perforated leather. I specified the premium infotainment system with the large navigation screen. Knowing he secretly struggled with the map app on his ancient phone, I added the 360 degrees high-definition surround vision camera system, thinking of the tight spots he had to back his boat into at the lake. Every option was a carefully chosen word in a long overdue conversation. With the physical object secured, I moved to the symbolic details. The license plate was the easiest and most important decision. I went onto the Oklahoma Tax Commission website and typed in the 7 letters that defined the one uncomplicated memory of happiness I had with him after Mom was gone. He'd taken me fishing one summer afternoon. We didn't talk much, but as we sat on the banks of the Arkansas River, he showed me how to bait a hook, how to cast without snagging the line. For a few hours, he wasn't a grieving widower, and I wasn't a daughter desperate for approval. We were just two people by the river, RVR Porter. It cost an extra $80. I paid it without hesitation. The presentation had to be flawless. I ordered a colossal carbo online, the kind you see in commercials, in a vibrant, celebratory red. It felt theatrical, but this moment needed theater. I gave Tyrell specific instructions for the final prep. I want a full ceramic coating, I told him. I want the paint so deep and glossy it looks like a polished memory. He didn't question the strange request. The venue was next. I booked the private room at Raldi's, an old-school Italian place in Tulsa he and my mother used to go to for anniversaries. It was quiet, respectable, and held a whisper of her memory. I arranged for a table for 12, inviting my aunts, uncles, and Walt. I worked with the manager to set a menu of my father's favorites, fried calamari, veal saltimbocca, tiramisu for dessert. Nothing trendy, just comfort. Then came the hardest part, the card. I bought a single sheet of heavy cream-colored card stock, and a fountain pen. For 3 nights, I sat at my desk in Denver, the city lights a distant, glittering distraction, and I wrote. I filled 3 pages, front and back. I wrote about the silence, about the report cards, about the debate trophies. I wrote about the fishing trip on the river. I wrote about how everything I had ever done was a quiet, clumsy attempt to hear him say he was proud of me. I told him this truck wasn't a transaction, it was a translation of all the words I could never say. My hand cramped, and ink smudged on the page where a few tears fell. I sealed it in an envelope, my heart pounding with a terrifying mix of hope and dread. Legally, the vehicle had to be in my name. I worked with Tyrell and a notary. All the purchase agreements and the title application were signed by Kira Duval. The official certificate of title would be mailed to me. I had Tyrell draw up a simple gift transfer document. It was all filled out, listing him as the recipient. All it needed was my signature on the seller a gifter line. I placed it, along with the pristine, unopened box containing the keys and the thick envelope with my letter, into a gift bag. I would sign it over to him at the dinner table, the final act of the ceremony. In the final days, I rehearsed the speech in front of my bathroom mirror. I was a strategist. I planned for contingencies. I had 2 versions. The first was short and sweet, for the scenario where he was overcome with emotion and words were unnecessary. You've worked hard your whole life, Dad. You deserve something that works as hard as you do. Happy 60th. The second version was for the more likely scenario, his awkward, uncomfortable silence. It was longer, a gentle monologue designed to fill the quiet, to guide him toward the intended emotional response, explaining the license plate, the color, the shared memory it all represented. I practiced until the words felt natural, until my smile in the mirror didn't look as terrified as I felt. Every detail was set. Every variable was accounted for. The plan was perfect. He was on time to the minute. But he wasn't alone. He walked into the warm, wood-paneled private room at Raldi's, holding the hand of a woman I had never seen before. She was elegant, perhaps in her early 50s, with a cascade of ash-blonde hair, and a quiet confidence that seemed to soften the rigid lines of my father's posture. He introduced her simply as, "This is Lorraine Hale." My aunts and uncles, already seated, exchanged flickering, telegraphic glances. I felt a tectonic plate shift somewhere deep inside me. This variable had not been on my spreadsheet. Then I saw it as he pulled out a chair for her. He leaned down and said something I couldn't hear. Lorraine laughed, a soft, tinkling sound, and he smiled. It wasn't his usual thin, controlled line of a smile. This was a genuine, unguarded curve of the lips, a crinkling at the corners of his eyes that reached all the way into him. It was a 20-watt smile in a lifetime of dim 5-watt acknowledgments. It was an expression of pure, unmanufactured warmth, and it wasn't for me. It never had been. In that instant, I felt the carefully constructed architecture of my plan groan under a sudden, immense pressure. I stood there, the host of a party where I was suddenly the stranger. I moved through the motions of dinner in a fog. I listened to the chatter, the clinking of wine glasses, the scraping of forks on ceramic. I asked Lorraine polite questions about her work. She was a landscape architect, and I listened to her thoughtful answers. My father was a different man with her beside him. He participated. He offered opinions on the wine. He told a brief, dryly witty story about a malfunction at the plant that almost made my uncle laugh. He was present. He was engaged. I watched the two of them, a knot tightening in my stomach. The entire evening, the entire year of sacrifice, was predicated on filling a void in his life that it appeared had already been filled. Just as the waiter cleared the plates from our main course, the veal saltimbocca he'd always loved, I saw my chance. "Excuse me for just a moment," I announced, my voice impossibly steady. "I need to check on one last thing." I walked out of the warm restaurant and into the cool, dark expanse of the parking lot. The Oklahoma night was vast and starry. I pulled out my phone, my fingers feeling numb. I opened my texts to Tyrell. Just 2 words, "Ready?" A moment later, he replied, "Showtime." I walked back inside. My heart was a cold, heavy drum against my ribs. "Could everyone join me outside for a minute?" I announced. "There's one more surprise." A murmur of curiosity rippled through the table. My father looked at me, his expression unreadable, a blank slate. Lorraine placed a reassuring hand on his arm. The family filed out into the night, their chatter hushed with anticipation. I led them around the corner of the building to the premium spot Tyrell had reserved. And there it was, the GMC Sierra 1500. Under the yellow glow of the parking lot lamps, the midnight blue paint was as deep and dark as an ocean. The ceramic coat gleamed, reflecting the stardust sky like a mirror. And tied to the grille was the enormous, impossibly red bow, a splash of cinematic joy against the truck's formidable presence. There was a collective intake of breath. My aunt whispered, "Oh, Kira." Walt let out a low whistle. I turned to my father. "Happy 60th, Dad." His face was a mask. He didn't look at me, his eyes were fixed on the truck. He began to walk, a slow, deliberate circle around the vehicle. He ran a hand along the fender, his fingers tracing the sharp crease in the steel. He peered into the tinted windows of the crew cab. His eyes, methodical and precise, scanned every detail, the tires, the chrome accents, the tow hitch. He was inspecting it, auditing it, not receiving it. I saw his lips part just for a second, as if to say something, but then they pressed together into a hard, flat line. The door to his emotion, which I thought I had glimpsed a kraken, was now closed, bolted, and barred. I held out the gift bag. "The keys are in here." He took the bag without a word, his hand brushing mine. The contact was cold. He held the bag for a moment, then tucked it under his arm. He didn't open it. He didn't look inside. The silence stretched, becoming brittle and sharp. Walt finally broke it. "Well, hell, Graham. Aren't you going to take it for a spin?" My father turned his gaze from the truck and looked at the small crowd of his family. "There's cake inside," he said, his voice flat. "Let's not let it melt." The walk back into the restaurant was a funeral procession. The energy, the excitement, had been bled dry and left on the asphalt. We sat back down at the table, the awkwardness palpable. The waiter, oblivious, brought out a large tiramisu cake, its surface ablaze with 60 tiny candles. The family launched into a strained, off-key rendition of Happy Birthday. My father blew out the candles in a single, efficient puff. As the waiter began slicing the cake, Graham pushed his chair back and stood up. He picked up his glass of red wine. A hush fell over the room. This was it. The speech, my version too, the one for his awkwardness, was queued up in my mind, ready to deploy. He held the glass up, the ruby liquid catching the light. He cleared his throat. "I'd like to propose a toast," he began, his voice carrying the familiar authoritative tone of my childhood. He looked around the table, his eyes skipping past me. "To my foolish daughter," he said, the words dropping like stones into the silent room. My blood ran cold. "Who thinks you can buy family with a checkbook?" A sickening beat of silence, then a smattering of confused, nervous laughter from a cousin. My aunt gasped. I saw Lorraine's face freeze, a pained, plastic smile forming on her lips. Walt stared down at his hands, his knuckles white. The rest of my family suddenly found the pattern on their bread plates utterly fascinating. No one met my eye. The humiliation was a physical force, a white-hot wave that washed over me. But on the surface, I was perfectly still. The strategist in my head took over, executing an emergency protocol. Do not cry. Do not scream. Do not give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Slowly, deliberately, I picked up my linen napkin from my lap. I folded it neatly and placed it on the table beside my untouched slice of cake. I looked up and, for the first time that night, I met my father's gaze. I gave him a small, calm, serene smile. Then I stood up, pushed in my chair, and walked out of the room without a word. I drove. I didn't have a destination, just an instinct. My rental car's engine sounded thin and inadequate in the vast, dark Oklahoma night. My hands were steady on the wheel, my foot even on the accelerator. The strategist in my head, the part of me that runs campaigns, was already processing the data from the dinner, analyzing the total catastrophic failure of the initiative. The emotional part of me, the 12-year-old girl who just wanted her dad to be proud, had been assassinated. What was left was cold, hard, and silent. My muscle memory took me north, out of the city, toward the dark, choppy water of Keystone Lake. It was the place Mom loved, the place she took me to skip rocks and watch the sailboats. It was never Dad's place, he preferred the muddy banks of the river. I parked the rental in a deserted gravel lot overlooking the water. I couldn't see the lake, but I could hear it. The waves restlessly slapping the shore, driven by a wind that moaned through the blackjack oaks. I rolled down the window. The air smelled of damp earth, fish, and the coming of a new, cold day. I sat there in the humming silence of the car, and let the realization crystallize, sharp and perfect as ice. I bought a dream for a man who no longer believes in dreams, or perhaps more accurately, a man who resents any dream he didn't build himself. The truck wasn't a gift, it was an intrusion. It was a statement that he was lacking, that he was in need, and my father, Graham Porter, would rather burn his own life to the ground than admit to needing anything, especially from me. The toast wasn't a clumsy mistake made in a moment of awkwardness, it was a precision strike. It was a public, humiliating execution of my hope. It was a warning delivered with the casual cruelty of a king to stay out of his fortress. My phone, sitting in the cup holder, began to vibrate. The screen lit up the dark cabin, a harsh, intrusive blue light. A text message from my Aunt Clara, *, where are you? Honey, please come back. *. I watched the screen go dark. A minute later, it lit up again, * your uncle. Kira, don't overreact. Your father is just, you know how he is. He gets like this. Don't make it a bigger deal. *. Overreact. The word was a small, sharp sting. My reaction was the problem, not his action. This was the family way. This was the ecosystem of denial that had allowed my father's emotional tyranny to flourish for 2 decades. They were all his enablers, the silent custodians of his dysfunction. Another text. A different uncle, * he was just kidding. Kira, it was a bad joke. Come on. * kidding. That was the lie they would all agree on, that surgical soul-flaying sentence was a bad joke. I felt a cold, bitter laugh rise in my chest. But I swallowed it. I was done making noise. Then the phone buzzed, not with a text, but a call. An unknown Tulsa number. I let it ring 4 times, then answered, my voice flat. Dead? Hello, Kira. Oh, thank God. It's Lorraine. Her voice was shaky, laced with a genuine distress that was completely foreign to my family's interactions. Kira, I am so sorry for what he said. That was monstrous. And I think I laughed. I don't even know why, it was just the shock. I am so terribly sorry. I didn't mean to, I said, nothing. The wind whistled through the crack in my window. Kira, please, she rushed on. I'm in the parking lot at Raldi's. I don't know what's wrong with him. He's losing it. That word, losing it, was so alien, so completely incongruous with the man I knew, that it barely registered. Graham Porter did not lose it. He was the monolith. He was the unmoving object. He was schedules and steel and silence. What do you mean? I asked, my voice betraying no curiosity. He's just pacing, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. He's in the parking lot, just walking around the truck. He's walked around it maybe 20 times. He keeps touching the door handle, the mirror, like he's afraid it's hot, but he won't open it. He won't get in. I tried to talk to him, and he just waved his hand at me. Walt tried, and he snapped at him. I've been with him for 8 months, Kira. And I have never seen him like this. He's just unraveling, losing it, unraveling. For the first time, someone was describing my father as a human being, as someone whose internal wiring could short-circuit. A flicker of something, not sympathy, but validation, moved through me. He could feel. He wasn't made of stone. He was capable of being overwhelmed. And in that moment of being overwhelmed by an emotion he couldn't catalogue, joy, shock, gratitude, shame, his only reflex, his deepest, most ingrained instinct was to find the nearest target, and wound it. He chose to hurt me rather than feel something he couldn't control. That was all the confirmation I needed. The diagnosis was complete. The patient was not just stoic, he was toxic. He'll be fine, I said, and my voice was so cold it surprised even me. He's just adjusting. Kira, wait. I hung up. I closed my eyes for a single, long second. The last thread of hope, the one that whispered, maybe he didn't mean it, was cut. I opened my phone and went to my email. The screen was blindingly bright. It was 4:30 a.m. To Tyrell, High Mesa Motors. Subject, calm. Subject, urgent. Return request. Order Sierra 1500. Tyrell, a change in circumstances has made the gift unviable. I need to return the vehicle. I am aware of how irregular this is, but the gift was publicly and explicitly refused by the recipient. I will be at the dealership when you open. What is the absolute earliest I can be there? I will, of course, cover any and all restocking fees, detailing charges, or other penalties associated with this reversal. I just need this transaction undone. My apologies for the emergency. Kira Duval. I hit send. The small whoosh sound was the most satisfying thing I had heard all night. The plan was dead. A new plan was born. Task 1, liquidating the asset. I did not sleep. I watched the black sky over the lake bruise to a deep purple, then a sickly gray, and finally a cold, metallic blue. At 5:15 a.m., I started the rental car and drove, not to my hotel, but to the house, the one on the quiet suburban street where I grew up. I parked a block away and walked. The air was sharp, and the neighborhood was silent, wrapped in that pre-dawn stillness. And there it was. It was parked on the curb in front of the house, exactly where I had left it for the grand reveal, in the sterile blue light of the new day. It was magnificent. The midnight blue paint was so deep it looked wet, and the chrome grille was a quiet, imposing slash of silver. It was a monument to American engineering. It was a $60,000 symbol of my own staggering stupidity. It was still wearing the giant red bow, which now looked garish and pathetic, like a clown's smile at a funeral. I walked up the driveway, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I used the spare key I'd had since I was 16, the one with the faded teddy bear charm Mom had given me. The lock on the side door clicked open. I eased the door open and slipped inside. The house was still. It smelled of his brand of coffee and the faint, dusty smell of a place lived in by one person. I walked into the kitchen, and there on the granite countertop was the evidence, the gift bag. The elegant silver-embossed box from the dealership was sitting right on top, exactly as I had handed it to him. The clear plastic shrink wrap was still intact. The small circular seal was unbroken. He never even opened it. He never held the heavy, polished fob. He never felt its weight in his hand. He never saw the keys, and buried beneath it was the cream-colored, 3-page letter. The letter that held every word I'd never been able to say, every achievement that was a plea for his love. It was unread. All my articulated, carefully crafted vulnerability, all my explanations, all my truth. He hadn't even bothered to look. The humiliation was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was a void. A cold, clean, empty space inside me. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a nullification. I didn't exist. My effort didn't exist. I moved with the silent, precise economy of a ghost. I took the manila envelope containing all the legal paperwork, the purchase agreement, the title application in my name, the unsigned gift transfer document, from the bag. I took the sealed, unopened key box. I went to the hook by the door, and took the spare fob I had planned to give him later. I looked at the counter, now empty. I saw the yellow post-it notepad he used for grocery lists. I pulled off a single 3x 3-inch square. I held my pen over it. I thought of all the things I could write, asterisk how could you? Why you broke me, asterisk instead, I wrote nothing. I pressed the blank yellow square onto the counter, right where the key box had been. A void for a void. An empty gesture to mark an empty space. I walked back out the side door, closing it silently behind me. I walked to the Sierra. I pressed the unlock button on the fob. The truck chirped, a polite, expensive sound. The parking lights flashed, illuminating the pre-dawn darkness. I opened the driver's door. The smell of new leather and clean carpet filled my lungs. It smelled like money and opportunity and wasted hope. I climbed into the high cabin. The perforated leather felt cold against my back. I put my foot on the brake. I pressed the engine start button. The 5.3L V8 engine roared to life with a deep, throaty, powerful rumble. It was the sound of strength, the sound of a promise. The dash lit up, a futuristic display of blue and white light. The cabin was silent, insulated from the world. It was the most beautiful, most powerful, most competent machine I had ever commanded. I put the truck in drive. The transmission engaged with a seamless hydraulic thunk. I released the brake. The truck rolled forward, smooth as glass. I drove down the street where he had impatiently taught me to ride a bike. The street I had fled for college. In the rearview mirror, the small brick house was shrinking. I did not look at it. I turned the corner. The sound of the tires on the asphalt, the only sound in the world. I drove away from my childhood in my father's dream. Without a single glance back, I was on the highway heading east toward High Mesa Motors as the sun began to bleed a violent, angry red across the horizon. My phone, resting on the rich, leather-stitched passenger seat, vibrated. I glanced at the screen. A new text from Graham, asterisk where's the truck, asterisk not, are you okay, Kira? Not, we need to talk. Not, I'm sorry. Asterisk where's the truck, asterisk he wasn't worried about his daughter, he was worried about the asset, the possession, the thing he had publicly scorned, but in the cold, clear light of morning, had clearly expected to find waiting for him. The hypocrisy was a physical, choking thing. I looked at the message. I was driving his answer. I put my hand on the phone, my thumb hovering over the reply button. I could write so much. I could send him a photo of the dashboard. Instead, I just turned the phone over, screen side down, on the empty passenger seat. His silence would be met with my own. I gripped the wheel, accelerated, and merged into the fast lane. I pulled the Sierra into the High Mesa Motor Service Bay. At precisely 6:01 a.m., the massive bay door rumbled shut behind me, the sound echoing in the cavernous, brightly lit space. It was sterile, smelling of rubber and industrial soap. The truck, under the harsh fluorescent lights, looked even more magnificent. It was a machine of heartbreaking, flawless potential. Tyrell was waiting, just as his email said he would be. His usual 1,000-watt salesman's smile was gone, replaced by a pained, awkward expression. He looked like a man attending a funeral for a deal he truly believed in. Beside him stood an older man in a crisp, logoed golf shirt, holding a tablet. His face was all business. "Ms. Duval," the manager said, stepping forward. His name tag read Henderson. Tyrell explained the situation. "This is, as you know, highly irregular." "I am aware," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion that was still churning like cold cement in my gut. I stepped out of the high cabin, the scent of new leather following me. I placed the unopened, shrink-wrapped key box and the spare fob on the hood. The gift was publicly refused. "I need to reverse the transaction, Henderson." A small puff of professional impatience. He began a slow walk around the truck, his eyes scanning it, not with my father's dumbstruck awe, but with an appraiser's critical gaze. "It has 47 miles on it, Ms. Duval, as of this morning. It is a used vehicle. It had 12 miles on it when I picked it up last night," I counted, my voice as cold as the concrete floor. "The other 35 are from driving it to the event, and driving it here from my father's curb." "Look," Henderson said, tapping his tablet, "I'm not here to mediate a family dispute. We can unwind this, but there are costs. Title reversal fees, the non-refundable ceramic coating you ordered, and the simple fact that I have to take a significant hit on the depreciation. I can no longer sell this as new." "What is the number?" I asked. I wasn't there to negotiate. I was there to excise. He looked at his screen. $2,000. We'll call it a processing and depreciation fee. We absorb the rest of the loss. That's the best I can do." "Fine." I didn't blink. $2,000 to buy back my dignity felt like a bargain. Deducted from the refund to my card. "Please draw up the paperwork." Tyrell stepped forward, his face etched with genuine distress. "Ms. Duval, are you absolutely sure? Sometimes, you know, things get said. Maybe he just needs a day to process it. A truck like this, it's a lot." "He processed it," I said, meeting Tyrell's empathetic gaze. "He processed it by publicly humiliating me in front of my entire family. His toast was the receipt. I am returning the item." My finality settled on them. Henderson nodded once sharply. "I'll get the reversal forms." He turned and walked toward his office. Tyrell lingered, looking down at the file in his hand. He was the one who had taken my excited calls, who had helped me plan the specs, who had shared in the conspiracy of the surprise. This really stinks, Ms. Duval. I'm sorry. I saw the order for the custom plate." He pointed to the line item. "RVR Porter. You put a lot of thought into this." I just nodded, a sudden, sharp exhaustion pressing down on me. I had been up for over 24 hours, running on pure, high-octane rage. "You know," Tyrell said, speaking slowly, as if testing the fragility of the air around me, "we do a lot of community outreach here. Sometimes when a big gesture doesn't quite land, the client likes to convert it. Turn the gift into a tribute." I frowned. "A tribute?" "Yeah. We have a partnership with the Tulsa Community Foundation. Instead of just taking the full refund minus the fee, some people choose to redirect a portion, to a scholarship fund or a charity, something positive. He was just a good salesman trying to find an upside, trying to salvage a positive outcome from a catastrophic failure. But the word he used resonated: tribute. A tribute to what? A broken relationship. 20 years of silence. Then the name came to me, clear as a bell: Elena Duval. My mother, the woman who actually loved me with words, the woman whose memory I had been chasing, whose warmth I had been trying to get my father to replicate. I stood there in the service bay, surrounded by the smell of tires and oil, and for the first time, I saw a new path. Not a retreat, but a repurpose. I let the silence stretch for a full 5 minutes, my mind, the strategist, rapidly building a new campaign. Henderson returned, holding a new set of papers and a clipboard. "I'll do it," I said, and my voice was suddenly clear and strong. Tyrell brightened. "You will?" "Yes. I want to establish a scholarship fund, the Elena Duval Memorial Scholarship, for young women from Tulsa County pursuing a degree in marketing or communications. Can you facilitate that?" Henderson looked surprised, his professional mask slipping for a second. Yes, we can certainly facilitate the initial donation to the foundation." "Good." I turned to him, all business. "From the refunded amount, I want you to authorize an immediate $10,000 transfer to the Tulsa Community Foundation to establish that fund. Tyrell and I can work out the administrative details later today, but the donation is authorized now." I picked up the pen to sign the return forms. Then I stopped. "One more thing," I said, looking at Henderson. "The license plate, RVR Porter. I paid for it separately. It's my property. I am not returning it with the truck. I want it assigned to the scholarship. It will be the name of the top-tier recipient each year, the River Porter Scholar." I was taking back the one solitary shared memory. I was rewriting its meaning. It would no longer be a symbol of him and me on a muddy riverbank. It would be a symbol of my mother's legacy, funded by the dissolution of my father's refused dream. It was a perfectly balanced, strategic reclamation. I signed the papers. The transaction was done. The Sierra was gone. I walked out of the dealership into the harsh 7 a.m. sunlight and got into my gray, anonymous rental car. I sat for a moment in the sudden, anticlimactic silence. I had just turned $60,000 of desperate hope into a $2,000 processing fee and a $10,000 act of symbolic defiance. I felt clean. I picked up my phone. It had exploded. The screen was a battlefield of his rage. "Graham, did you move the truck?" 6:30 a.m. "Graham, this isn't funny." "Kira, where is it?" 6:45 a.m. "Graham, your aunt said you left." "You took the truck." "You can't do that." "That's my truck." My truck. The breathtaking, staggering arrogance of it. The thing he had publicly shamed me for. 6:50 a.m. "Graham, answer your phone. You're acting like a child." 7:05 a.m. "Graham, you stole my truck. That's theft." "Kira, I am calling the police." 7:10 a.m. "I am Graham. Answer me. You are a thief. Child, thief." The words he used for his daughter. The daughter who had bled her bank account dry for him. The ice in my veins, which had been melting, refroze into something harder than steel. My thumbs, steady and precise, moved over the screen. I was no longer a wounded daughter. I was a strategist responding to a false and libelous accusation. The truck was never yours. I never signed the gift transfer document. The vehicle was and remained my legal property. You publicly humiliated me and refused the gift. I returned my property to the dealership this morning. There is no theft. There is only a consequence. Do not contact me again. I hit send. I blocked his number. I blocked my aunts and my uncles, all the silent enablers. I left only one line open. It rang almost immediately. Lorraine. I let it ring 3 times, then answered, my voice clipped. Kira Duval. Kira. Oh, thank God. He just got your text. He threw his coffee mug against the kitchen wall. It shattered everywhere. A destroyed mug, I replied, my voice empty of sympathy. A small price to pay for what he did to me. Please, she begged, and I could hear she was crying, a raw, desperate sound. Please, I know you're hurt. You have every right to be. You have a right to burn this whole city down. But there is something you need to know about him. Something you don't understand. I think I understand him perfectly, Lorraine. For the very first time, he's a bully. He's a man who would rather publicly destroy his own daughter than say thank you. I have all the data I need. You don't, she insisted, her voice rising. You have all the output, but you don't know the code. I've been seeing him for 8 months, and for most of that time, I thought he was just what you see, rigid, cold, unfeeling. But he's not. He's just broken, Kira. He's broken in a way I've never seen in a man. That is not my problem to solve, I said. It isn't. But Kira, I was at his house a few weeks ago. I helped him clean out his home office. It was a disaster. And in his bottom desk drawer, the one he keeps locked. She paused, and the line was silent, save for her shaky breath. I waited. It's you, she whispered. It's all you. I gripped the steering wheel of the rental car. What are you talking about? He has files, Kira. He has. He has every article you've ever been quoted in for your work, printed out from the internet. He has a program from a college debate tournament with your name circled in red ink. He has a printed out email from one of your colleagues at Meridian Pixel. Someone you must have helped. A long letter thanking you for being a mentor. He has a leather-bound copy of your master's thesis. Kira, he has your first grade report card. The one with the excellent sticker laminated. The words hit me one by one like small, sharp stones. A drawer. A locked drawer. A secret museum of my life curated by the one man who had, to my face, pretended none of it mattered. He told me about the truck. Lorraine continued, her voice gaining a desperate, rushing speed. He said to me last week, I think Kira's going to do something big and stupid for my birthday. She's too extravagant. He was afraid of it. Kira, he was terrified of the gesture. He was afraid of the emotion he would be expected to show. So he prepared an insult. I fired back, the ice in my veins starting to crack, a hot, painful pressure building beneath it. No, he didn't know what to do when he saw it. Kira, I was sitting right next to him. I felt him. He was shaking. I swear to God, Graham Porter, his hand on the table was shaking. And then he did the only thing he knows how to do, which is what? When he is at his most vulnerable, Lorraine said, and her words were suddenly as analytical as my own, when he feels overwhelmed or ashamed or, God forbid, genuinely proud, he attacks. He uses cruelty as a shield. He doesn't know how to say what he feels. He only knows how to build a wall. And last night, you drove a $60,000 bright blue and red bow symbol of your love straight through his primary defense. And instead of surrendering, he just built another wall. A bigger one. Right in your face. He's a coward, Kira. A coward. Not a monster. The two were not mutually exclusive. My mind flashed, hot and vivid, to a summer afternoon when I was 16. I had just won a statewide essay competition, a $500 prize. I was ecstatic, incandescent, with a rare, uncomplicated pride. I ran to find him in the garage, where he was rebuilding a carburetor. I held out the plaque. He wiped his greasy hands on a rag, took it, read my name and the title, and handed it back. "Your conclusion was weak," he'd said, turning back to the engine. "You rushed the ending." That was it. My victory, my pride, my $500. All of it was reduced to a weak conclusion. It had frozen that summer, turning my achievement to ash. Now I understood, my success had made him feel something. Overwhelmed, proud, vulnerable. And he couldn't handle it. So he attacked. He found the weak point. He re-established control. He had done the exact same thing last night. The truck was too big. The gesture was too perfect. The love was too visible. He couldn't handle it. So he found my weak point, my desperate, lifelong need for his approval, and he attacked it. Foolish daughter buying family with a checkbook. It was the same play, just on a grander, more public stage. "Kira, are you still there?" Lorraine's voice was small. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The ice was gone, replaced by a cold, controlled fire. I finally had the complete data set. I had the why. He keeps my life in a locked drawer like a secret, and he punishes me for it in public. "I'm here," I said. "Thank you, Lorraine." That was clarifying. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the phone. I thought of his texts, *thief child. I thought of the new scholarship in my mother's name, funded by the truck he refused. I thought of the blank post-it note on his kitchen counter. "I'm not going to beg him for an apology," I said, "and I'm not going to talk it out. This isn't a family drama anymore. This is a damage assessment, and I'm coming back to the table. But this time, I won't be bringing a gift. I'll be bringing the truth. All of it." The flight from Tulsa to Denver was a 400-mile buffer zone. I moved from the zone of chaotic emotion into the sterile, pressurized calm of the aircraft cabin. The world outside the oval window was an abstract blur of clouds and blue. I didn't listen to music. I didn't read. I stared at the seat back in front of me, and I began to build a new file in my head. The campaign, Project Sierra, was a catastrophic failure. The debriefing was about to begin. My apartment in Lodu was a testament to my life, clean lines, grey quartz, glass, and steel. It was a controlled environment, a place where everything had a purpose and a place. It was the antithesis of the emotional mess I had just fled. I dropped my overnight bag on the polished concrete floor. I walked to my home office and knelt before a small digital safe concealed behind a minimalist print. I typed in the code. The lock clicked open. I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for records. My fingers bypassed my passport, and the few pieces of good jewelry I owned. I was looking for a small rectangular box. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, were my essential documents, birth certificate, social security card, and an old, faded blue savings passbook from a defunct Tulsa bank. My mother, Elena Duval, had opened it for me when I was 6. Her name was on the account as the custodian, Kira Duval, a minor. After her death, my father, as the surviving parent, had automatically assumed control of all my assets. I hadn't thought about this account in 20 years. But Lorraine's words had unlocked a door in my memory. A cold, dark room I hadn't known existed. *He's broken. He attacks when he's vulnerable. I had my old bank statements digitized and stored on a secure drive. It was the work of an afternoon 2 years ago, a fit of organizational zeal. Now I saw it as preparatory work. I logged into my encrypted drive and found the folder Archive Tulsa Savings. I opened the PDF scan for the period just after my mother's death. My eyes scanned the columns, deposits from birthday checks, small withdrawals for summer camp. Then I found it, 6 weeks after the funeral, a single massive withdrawal. Date, August 14th, transaction, counter withdrawal. Amount, $18,400. Memo, household expenses, $18,400. My entire childhood savings, every dollar my mother had put away for me, gone in a single transaction. The memo was a lie, a lazy, dismissive one. Household expenses. We owned our house. My father was a salaried engineer with good benefits. His grief had been silent, but his finances, I had always been told, were solid. This was not an expense, this was an appropriation. This was Exhibit A. I felt a cold, clear anger, sharper and more potent than the humiliation I'd felt at the restaurant. That had been an attack on my pride. That had been an attack on my pride. This was an attack on my past, on my mother's provision. I went to the closet and pulled down a heavy plastic tote labeled keepsakes. It was filled with the few things I had taken from the house when I left for college, the things I couldn't bear to leave in his silent custody. Report cards, old photos, my debate trophies, and a bundle of letters that my mother had written to me. Most were notes she tucked into my lunchbox. But one was different. It was in her elegant, looping script on her personal stationery. It was thick. I had found it tucked into the back of her desk drawer while we were cleaning out her things. Weeks after she died, I had read the first few lines, been overcome with a tidal wave of grief, and hidden it away. I hadn't looked at it since. I untied the ribbon. I unfolded the pages. It was dated 2 months before she got sick. I was 11. My dearest Kira, it began, I am writing this for you to read when you are older. Maybe when you go to college. There are things a mother wants her daughter to know, and I am so afraid I will forget to say them out loud. I want you to know how truly, blindingly proud I am of you. Your report card is wonderful, but it is not the why. I am proud of your mind. I am proud of your tenacity. I am proud of how you argue with me about your bedtime with logic and a straight face. You are a fire, my girl. Do not ever let anyone dim that or tell you your fire is too bright. I had to stop. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and continued reading. She wrote about her hopes for me, about the colleges she hoped I'd see, about the men she hoped I'd meet. Find one who laughs with you, Kira. It's the most important part. And then I reached the last page, the last paragraph. I want to tell you about your father. This is the hardest part. He is a good man. He is a steadfast man. He provides and he is honest. But he is not an easy man. Please, when you are older and you feel like you are throwing yourself against a stone wall trying to get him to see you, please remember your father loves you. But the sentence stopped. It just ended. The ink trailed off as if she had been interrupted, as if the thought was too large or too painful to complete. But that unfinished sentence was Exhibit B. But he doesn't know how. But his own pride is a prison. But he is a coward. But he is broken. Lorraine's testimony, the bank statement, the letter, the locked drawer full of my achievements. His grief had never been processed. He had buried it, and my mother, in the same cold ground, and in its place, he had erected a fortress of silent, rigid discipline. He had taken my savings, Perhaps to cover debts he was too proud to mention, perhaps to erase a financial memory of her, and covered his tracks with a three-word lie. He loved me, but his inability to process his own world made him incapable of participating in mine. My achievements, my love, my grand gestures, they weren't gifts to him. The next morning, I was at my desk by 7 a.m. I was no longer a daughter. I was a strategist executing a hostile takeover of my own family narrative. My first call was to Rachel Klein, a partner at a Denver law firm that was one of Meridian Pixel's oldest clients. We had a good professional rapport. Rachel, morning, Kira Duval. I have a non-work-related consultation I was hoping you could advise on. Strictly hypothetical, of course. Of course. Kira, what's on your mind? Client confidentiality applies. I'm exploring the legal and ethical boundaries of family dialogues, I said, my voice crisp and corporate. Tell me about fiduciary duty. If a parent is a custodian on a minor savings account and withdraws the entire balance for household expenses without explanation, what is the legal standing of the child once an adult? Rachel was silent for a beat. Legally murky. A parent has broad discretion. Ethically, that's a different conversation. Were there receipts? Was there an accounting? No accounting, I said. Just a vague memo. It's a breach of trust, Kira. Proving it as a prosecutable breach of duty would be difficult. You'd have to prove intent. I'm not interested in prosecution, I said. I'm interested in leverage. I'm interested in the power of a documented, provable fact in a conversation that has until now been governed by unprovable emotion. Ah, Rachel said, her voice warming with understanding. You're building a case, not for a judge, but for a jury of family. Exactly. One more thing. In your world, what is the value of corroborating testimony? Say, a third-party witness to a pattern of emotional behavior. It's foundational, she said. It establishes pattern and practice. It moves an event from an isolated incident to a documented strategy. Why? What are you building, Kira? A presentation, I said. Thank you, Rachel. This has been extremely clarifying. I hung up and opened a new PowerPoint file. I chose the cleanest, most corporate template Meridian had, white background, black sans serif font. This was not an emotional appeal, this was a report. I created 7 slides. Slide 1, title, The Things We Don't Say, an audit of the Porter-Duval relationship. Slide 2, The Asset. A stunning, high-resolution marketing photo of the Midnight Blue Sierra. A bulleted list of its key features, AT4 trim, tow package, leather interior. At the bottom, a single line, total investment, $60,450. Slide 3, the public refusal. A single, 72-point font quote in the center of the blank white slide. To my foolish daughter, who thinks you can buy family with a checkbook. Graham Porter, October 11, 2025. Slide 4, the private reaction. 2 columns. Left column, screenshots of his texts. You stole my truck. Thief child. Right column, corroborating witness testimony. L. Hale, with bullet points. Subject observed pacing vehicle. Unwilling to open. Subject described as unraveling. Subject terrified of the gesture. Subject maintains a locked drawer of recipient's achievements, printed and laminated. Slide 5, historical precedent. A timeline. 1999. Elena Duval letter. The unfinished quote, Your father loves you, but. 2005. Statewide essay competition. The quote. Your conclusion was weak. Slide 6, the unaccounted variable. A high-resolution scan of the bank statement from August 14, 1999. The $18,400 withdrawal was circled in red. The memo, household expenses, was highlighted in yellow. A single question at the bottom. A fiduciary breach. Slide 7. The next morning, I was at my desk by 7 a.m. I was no longer a daughter. I was a strategist executing a hostile takeover of my own family narrative. My first call was to Rachel Klein, a partner at a Denver law firm that was one of Meridian Pixel's oldest clients. We had a good professional rapport. Rachel, morning, Kira Duval. I have a non-work-related consultation I was hoping you could advise on. Strictly hypothetical, of course. Of course. Kira, what's on your mind? Client confidentiality applies. I'm exploring the legal and ethical boundaries of family dialogues, I said, my voice crisp and corporate. Tell me about fiduciary duty. If a parent is a custodian on a minor savings account and withdraws the entire balance for household expenses without explanation, what is the legal standing of the child once an adult? Rachel was silent for a beat. Legally murky. A parent has broad discretion. Ethically, that's a different conversation. Were there receipts? Was there an accounting? No accounting, I said. Just a vague memo. It's a breach of trust, Kira. Proving it as a prosecutable breach of duty would be difficult. You'd have to prove intent. I'm not interested in prosecution, I said. I'm interested in leverage. I'm interested in the power of a documented, provable fact in a conversation that has until now been governed by unprovable emotion. Rachel said, her voice warming with understanding. You're building a case, not for a judge, but for a jury of family. Exactly. One more thing. In your world, what is the value of corroborating testimony? Say, a third-party witness to a pattern of emotional behavior. It's foundational, she said. It establishes pattern and practice. It moves an event from an isolated incident to a documented strategy. Why? What are you building, Kira? A presentation, I said. Thank you, Rachel. This has been extremely clarifying. I hung up and opened a new PowerPoint file. I chose the cleanest, most corporate template Meridian had, white background, black sans serif font. This was not an emotional appeal, this was a report. I created 7 slides. Slide 1, title, The Things We Don't Say, an audit of the Porter-Duval relationship. Slide 2, The Asset. A stunning, high-resolution marketing photo of the Midnight Blue Sierra. A bulleted list of its key features. AT4 trim, tow package, leather interior. At the bottom, a single line, total investment, $60,450. Slide 3, the public refusal. A single, 72-point font quote in the center of the blank white slide. To my foolish daughter, who thinks you can buy family with a checkbook. Graham Porter, October 11, 2025. Slide 4, the private reaction. 2 columns. Left column, screenshots of his texts. You stole my truck. Thief child. Right column, corroborating witness testimony. L. Hale, with bullet points, subject observed pacing vehicle. Unwilling to open. Subject described as unraveling. Subject terrified of the gesture. Subject maintains a locked drawer of recipient's achievements, printed and laminated. Slide 5, historical precedent. A timeline. 1999, Elena Duval letter. The unfinished quote, your father loves you, but. 2005, statewide essay competition. The quote, your conclusion was weak. Slide 6, the unaccounted variable. A high-resolution scan of the bank statement from August 14, 1999. The $18,400 withdrawal was circled in red. The memo, household expenses, was highlighted in yellow. A single question at the bottom. A fiduciary breach. Slide 7. Resolution. The slide was completely blank. I saved the file. Porter debrief PTX. My next call was to Raldi's in Tulsa. I got the same manager. Hello, this is Kira Juval. I was the host of the party in the private room last Saturday. Yes, the one that ended abruptly. I'd like to book the room again for next Sunday, a follow-up dinner, a belated 60th celebration. The room was available. I gave him my credit card. I asked that the same menu be prepared. My final act was to draft an email. I sent it from my professional Meridian Pixel account. This was not a social invitation, it was a summons to Graham Porter, Walt, Lorraine Hale, Aunt Clara, Uncle Mike. Subject, invitation. A follow-up to Graham's 60th birthday. All, it read, thank you for attending the dinner last week. As the event concluded before we had time for a full discussion, I am hosting a follow-up dinner to provide clarity on the events of that evening and the subsequent actions I have taken. The dinner will be held at Raldi's in the same private room on Sunday, October 26th at 7 p.m. Your presence is requested. This is not a party, it is a meeting. I will be presenting a formal summary of our family's communications, and I will not be doing so again. Please come prepared to listen to the entire story. A final important note: to ensure focused, adult discussion, we request that no children be in attendance. I look forward to seeing you all there. Best, Kira Juval, Strategy Lead, Meridian Pixel. I stared at the last line I had added, no children in attendance. This was a room for adults, for people accountable for their actions and their words. There would be no nervous laughter from cousins. There would be no one to hide behind. I reminded myself of my closing objective. This wasn't a violent, bloody revenge. I wasn't here to destroy him. This was a corporate audit. This was a strategist's deposition. This was the cold, clean, overdue, and righteous act of returning the truth to its rightful owner. I was not seeking his love, I was seeking a balance sheet of zero. I was demanding the justice of the spoken word. I arrived at Raldi's an hour early. The manager, a man who now looked at me with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity, showed me to the private room. It was exactly as I had left it a week ago, a ghost of a celebration. But this time, it was not set for a party. I had brought my own equipment. A small, high-lumen projector sat in the center of the long table, its lens aimed at a portable screen I directed against the far wall. The lights in the room were dimmed to a soft, focused glow, creating a theatrical, almost prosecutorial atmosphere. At each of the 6 play settings, I laid a thin black folder. Inside each was a printed copy of the presentation, The Things We Don't Say. I sat at the head of the table, my laptop open, my back to the screen. I was the presenter. They would be the audience. I watched the door. My aunt and uncle were the first to arrive, creeping into the room as if entering a tomb. They saw the setup, and their faces tightened. They took their seats without a word, placing their hands on the closed folders, but not daring to open them. Walt came next, his usual gruff demeanor replaced by a heavy solemnity. He nodded at me, a gesture of grim respect, and sat down, his large hands dwarfing the folder in front of him. Then, at 7 p.m. precisely, the door opened again. It was my father, with Lorraine at his side. He had aged a decade in a week. The rigid, defiant posture was gone, replaced by a brittle tension. His eyes, dark and hollowed, darted around the room, taking in the projector, the screen, the folders. They finally landed on me. There was no anger in them. There was only a raw, hunted fear. Lorraine guided him to his seat opposite me, her hand a steadying presence on his arm. He sat down heavily, his hands immediately gripping the edges of his chair, his knuckles turning white. He did not touch the folder. He just stared at me, waiting for the axe to fall. The room was utterly silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the projector's fan and the distant, muffled clatter of cutlery from the main dining room. I let the silence hang for a full minute, a heavy, weighted blanket. Then I began. I did not stand. I remained seated. A CEO delivering a quarterly report on a corporate disaster. I looked directly at my father. "Dad," I said, my voice even and devoid of emotion. "Tonight, there is no buying. There is no selling. There is only the truth." I paused, letting the words land. I clicked the remote, the projector word, and the first image filled the screen. It was the truck. A perfect, glossy marketing shot of the Sierra 1500 in midnight blue. The enormous red bow still affixed to the grille. It looked powerful, beautiful, and absurdly hopeful. Below the image, a single line of black text appeared. Slide 1, the object of hope. I didn't need to say anything else. The image, a perfect symbol of the night that had shattered us, held the room captive. My aunt shifted uncomfortably in her chair. My father's gaze was fixed on the screen, his jaw tight. I clicked again. The screen changed. It was no longer a photograph, it was a scanned document, the official letterhead of the Tulsa Community Foundation. It was a confirmation of the establishment of a new fund. The camera zoomed in on the highlighted text, the Elena Duval Memorial Scholarship. Slide 2, the repurposed asset, I said, my voice a clinical monotone. The gift you refused did not evaporate, Dad. It was converted. It is now a $10,000 endowment in Mom's name, for young women, from this county, who want to build a life with their own words. The highest achieving recipient each year will receive a special designation. Another click. A close-up of the scholarship charter. The name of the designation was in bold, the RVR Porter Scholar. I heard Walt draw in a sharp breath. My father flinched as if he'd been struck. I had taken our one shared memory, the one he held hostage through his silence, and I had donated it to the public record in my mother's name. It no longer belonged to him. The physical asset is gone, I stated. But the intention behind it now has a permanent home. I clicked again. The screen now showed a stark black and white timeline. Slide 3, a pattern of silence. The timeline stretched from my childhood to the present. Each data point was a small, sharp wound. 1999, valedictorian middle school, paternal response, that's what you're supposed to do. 2005, statewide essay competition, paternal response, your conclusion was weak. 2010 to 2025, analysis of 78 inbound phone calls. Average duration, 14.8 minutes. Primary topics, weather, logistics, perfunctory health updates. 2015 to 2025, 10 birthdays acknowledged via text message, 8 acknowledged via phone call, 2 acknowledged with an expression of affection, 0. It was the anatomy of our relationship laid bare in the cold language of a corporate audit. It was brutal. It was undeniable. My uncle was now staring at the table, his face pale. I didn't let them recover. I clicked again. The screen showed a scan of a handwritten letter. The elegant, looping script was instantly recognizable to everyone in the room. It was my mother's. Slide 4, the unfinished testimony. I read the words aloud, my voice steady, letting her voice fill the space she had left vacant for so long. I want to tell you about your father. This is the hardest part. He is a good man. He is a steadfast man. Please, when you are older and you feel like you are throwing yourself against a stone wall, trying to get him to see you, please remember, your father loves you. But I stopped reading. The unfinished sentence hung in the air, a question that had haunted my entire life. I let the silence stretch, thick with the ghost of her presence. Then I turned off the projector. The room was plunged back into a dim, intimate twilight. Now there were no more slides. There was only me. I looked at my father. He was ashen, his knuckles bone white from gripping the chair. Last Saturday, I began, my voice softer now, but sharper like a surgeon's scalpel, when you stood up and raised that glass, I finally understood the end of my mother's sentence. I finally understood the but. You had a choice, Dad. You could have said, this is too much. You could have said, I don't know how to accept this. You could have said, I'm overwhelmed. You could have said, I'm proud of you, but I'm ashamed. I could never give this to myself. You could have told the truth. I leaned forward slightly. But you didn't. You chose to attack instead of admitting you were vulnerable. You chose to humiliate me rather than feel an emotion you couldn't control. You finished my mother's sentence, your father loves you, but he will hurt you before he will ever let you see that he is weak. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't empty, it was dense with the weight of 20 years of unspoken truth. Then a chair scraped against the floor. It was Walt. He stood up, his big frame seeming to shrink under the pressure in the room. He looked at my father, his face a mask of profound, pained conflict. He's right, Graham, Walt said, his voice a low rumble. Kira's right. My father's head snapped up to look at his oldest friend. A look of pure, animal betrayal flashed in his eyes. I have to say this, Walt continued, his gaze now on me. Lorraine is right about the drawer. I've seen it. Not the drawer, but the behavior. 4 years, we'd be at the plant on our lunch break. He'd be on that old computer in the break room. I'd see him looking up articles from the Denver Business Journal. I saw him print one out once. It was an interview with you, Kira, about some big campaign you'd won. He folded it up, neat as you please, and put it in a clean envelope. He never said a word about it. Not to me, not to anyone. He just collected it like a secret. Walt looked back at my father, his voice thick with a strange mix of anger and pity. Why, Graham? Why keep it all a secret? Why act like you don't care, when it's the only damn thing you do seem to care about? The accusation coming from Walt, his peer, his friend, was the one blow my father could not deflect. It was a betrayal of their silent, masculine pact. All the air went out of him. The rigid discipline that had been his spine for my entire life seemed to dissolve. His shoulders slumped, his head bowed. He stared at his hands, which were now trembling slightly on the arms of the chair. The room held its breath. He opened his mouth. A dry, rasping sound came out. He swallowed and tried again. The words were a ghost, a whisper so quiet it was almost swallowed by the hum of the air conditioning. I was ashamed. The word hung in the room, thin and brittle. Ashamed. It was the first truly vulnerable word he had spoken to me in my adult life. For a single, agonizing second, the entire intricate architecture of my presentation teetered. The strategist in me had prepared for denial, for anger, for silence. I had not fully prepared for a confession. But the moment of vulnerability passed as quickly as it came. It was an involuntary exposure, and his reflexes, honed over a lifetime, immediately kicked in to cauterize the wound. He visibly straightened in his chair. The fear in his eyes was instantly painted over with a flat, cold coat of his old authority. His defensiveness, his fortress, went back up brick by brick. The truck was ostentatious, he said, his voice stronger now, regaining its familiar judgmental cadence. He wasn't looking at me, he was addressing the table, as if I were a third party to be discussed. It was a childish, theatrical display. You embarrassed me. Kira, you put me on the spot. There it was, the pivot, the counteroffensive. I was not the victim of his cruelty. I was the perpetrator of his embarrassment. The room tensed, waiting for my reaction. My aunt let out a small, relieved sigh as if the world was finally spinning back on its correct axis. With my father back in charge, I did not raise my voice. I did not argue. I simply picked up the remote. Slide 5, I announced, my voice cutting through his narrative. The projector whirred, and the screen lit up again. This time, it was not a photograph. It was a stark white background with black text. My text messages to him were on the right, in their polite blue bubbles. His on the left were in their stark grey ones. Kira, the truck was my legal property. I returned my property to the dealership. Graham, you stole my truck. Graham, that's theft. Kira, I am calling the police. You called me a child. And you called me a thief. I said, my voice as cold and clear as the text on the screen. You threatened to have your daughter arrested for retrieving her own property. Property you had publicly, and I quote, called foolish. Which is it, Dad? Was it an embarrassing childish gift you didn't want, or was it your truck that I stole? He had no answer. He just stared at the screen, his own words accusing him. You said I embarrassed you, I continued, relentless. I clicked again. A new image appeared. It was a close-up photo I had taken in the pre-dawn light of his kitchen. The silver-embossed dealership box sitting on his counter. The clear plastic shrink wrap was still intact. The small circular seal was unbroken. This is the box, I said. This is the box I handed you. It was 5:15 a.m. the morning after the party, nearly 10 hours after I had given it to you. It was still sealed. You never opened it. You never saw the keys. You never read the 3-page letter I wrote you. The letter that explained everything. You humiliated me. And then you went home, and went to bed without even the simple courtesy of looking at my words. You didn't just refuse the gift. Dad, you nullified my entire effort. You nullified me. That's not fair, Graham. The voice was Lorraine's. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping on the floor. She was looking at him, her face a mask of anguished frustration. That is not fair to her. Graham shot her a look of pure venom. You stay out of this, Lorraine. This is family. And I will not sit here and let you lie to her. You are ashamed, Graham, but not of the truck. You're ashamed of yourself. She turned to me, her eyes pleading. Kira, he talks about you every Sunday. We have coffee. We read the paper. And he finds a way to bring you up. Kira's firm just landed a new account. Kira is flying to Chicago for a presentation. He told me 3 weeks ago. He said, Kira is smarter than I ever was. She built her whole life out of nothing. He said that, Kira. I heard him. Lorraine, my father roared, and he shot to his feet, his chair crashing backward onto the floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the small room. My aunt screamed. I don't need an interpreter, he bellowed, his face a terrifying, mottled red. The veins stood out on his neck. It was the first time I had ever heard him raise his voice above a cold, controlled command. This was not anger. This was a detonation. This was the sound of the fortress walls cracking, of the man inside, the weak, ashamed, terrified man, being exposed to the open air. This was the unraveling Lorraine had described. He stood there panting, his fists clenched, his authority shattered, leaving only the raw, ugly rage of a cornered animal. I let the silence after his shout settle. Let them all feel the violence of it. He had just proven my entire case. I looked at him, my expression unchanged. "Please sit down, Dad. I'm not finished." He looked at me, his rage dimming, confusion taking its place. He looked at Lorraine, who was crying silently. He looked at Walt, who was staring at him with undisguised disappointment. Slowly, his shoulders slumped. He righted his chair and sat back down, a defeated, deflated man. I reached for the last folder on the table. It was thicker than the others. I didn't click to a new slide, this I would deliver by hand. I slid the black folder across the polished table. It stopped directly in front of him. "This is the last exhibit," I said, my voice quiet. "This is not about the truck. This is not about my feelings. This is about a fact. This is about a number." He stared at the folder, his hand still trembling as if it were a bomb. "Open it." He looked at me, his eyes wide with a new dawning horror. He knew this was not a picture of a truck. This was something else. His fingers fumbled with the cover. He opened it. Inside was a single, high-resolution copy of a bank statement, the faded blue letterhead of the Tulsa Savings and Loan, the account of Kira Juval, a minor, and the single circled line item from August 14, 1999. The withdrawal of $18,400. The blood drained from his face. He went from red to a ghostly, papery white. "You're 34 years old," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. This is from 6 weeks after my mother's funeral," I finished for him, my voice like ice. "You entered my savings account, my mother's money for me, and you wrote a 3-word lie on the memo, household expenses. You're a salaried engineer with a paid-off mortgage. Dad, we both know that was a lie. You've had 22 years to explain this to me, and you never said a word. You owe me an explanation." The room was perfectly still. I could hear my aunt breathing, a quick, shallow, panicky sound. Walt just closed his eyes. Graham stared at the paper, his whole body shaking. The rigid, disciplined man I had known my entire life was gone. And in his place was a trembling, broken old man. He looked up, and his eyes were swimming in tears he refused to let fall. I, he stammered. The medical bills. Your mother's illness. There were things insurance didn't cover. Experimental treatments, co-pays, they were thousands. And the roof was leaking that spring. The big storm. It was drenching the attic. I had to have it replaced. His voice was a desperate, pleading whisper. I used the money. I used it to keep the house together, to pay the last of her bills. I kept the receipts. I put them in a box. I was going to show you. I was going to pay you back, but I couldn't. I was so ashamed that I had to take my child's money just to keep us from drowning. I couldn't face you. I couldn't tell you. It was a perfect, heartbreaking confession. It was plausible. It painted him as a tragic, overburdened widower sacrificing his own pride to protect his home. And it was a lie, at least a lie of omission. I reached for my briefcase on the floor. I pulled out a final, thin manila envelope. I didn't give it to him. I kept it in front of me. I believe you, I said, and he looked up, a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. I believe there were bills. I believe the roof was replaced. I know you're a man who keeps records. In fact, I went to the county public library. I spent 2 days in their municipal archives. I pulled the permits for the roof replacement on our house. I pulled the public liens and satisfactions from the hospital. I opened the envelope and slid out a small stack of photocopied receipts. You are correct. The roof was replaced. The final hospital bill was settled. The dates match your timeline. He let out a choked sob of relief. But I continued, holding up one of the receipts, a copy of a cashier's check paid to the roofing company. You were so careful, weren't you? You paid for everything in cashier's checks or money orders. There is no record of who paid these bills. There is no Graham Porter in the pair line, just an anonymous, untraceable bank draft. The hope in his face died. You didn't just hide this from me, I said, my voice low and final. You scrubbed the records. You erased yourself from the transaction. You took my money, and you created a perfect clean break so no one could ever prove it. You didn't just hide your shame, Dad, you buried the evidence. Lorraine, who had been watching him with a look of dawning, horrified comprehension, finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, full of a terrible, sad clarity. Or was it Graham, she asked, looking at him. Was it because you were so ashamed of that one moment of weakness, of needing that money, that you spent the next 22 years building a new man? A man who was perfect. A man who was severe and disciplined and in control. A man who needed nothing and who would criticize everyone else's weak conclusions and childish displays so that no one would ever look closely enough to see the one great foundational crack in your own wall. He had no answer. He just sat there, a man in the dock. His entire life's testimony disproven, his character witnesses defected, his own records used against him. I looked at him, not with hate, but with the cold, clear finality of a closed case. I'm not here tonight to get my $18,000 back, I said. I'm not here to get the truck back. It's gone. It's a scholarship now. It's doing more good for the world than it ever could have done sitting in your driveway. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table, and I held his gaze. I'm here for the respect you refused to give me. I'm here for the truth you tried to bury. I'm here to collect in front of the same people who watched you humiliate me. The one thing you have owed me for my entire life. The silence in the room was a living thing, thick and suffocating. My father sat hunched in his chair, a man hollowed out. The contents of his life emptied onto the table for all to see. The rage had left him, and what remained was a vast, desolate landscape of shame. My aunt and uncle stared at their plates, their faces slack with shock. They were no longer participants, merely spectators to a demolition. I did not press the advantage. A good strategist knows that after the primary assault, you must control the field. I stood up, my movement slow and deliberate. I walked to the small service station, at the side of the room, where a pitcher of ice water Saturday. I poured a single glass, the cubes clinking against the side with a sound that seemed unnervingly loud. I did not pour wine. The last toast had been made with wine, a toast of bitter poison. This one would be different. This would be a toast of clarity. I walked back to the table and placed the glass of clear, cold water directly in the center, equidistant from him and from me. A week ago, I said, my voice quiet, but carrying to every corner of the room, you raised a glass to my foolishness. Tonight, I will raise a different kind of glass. I let my eyes meet those of everyone at the table, one by one, Walt, Lorraine, my aunt, my uncle, and finally my father. I raise this glass, I said, my voice resonating with the weight of the ceremony I was inventing, to the man who dares to apologize, to the man who has the courage to speak the truth, even if it costs him his pride. I did not touch the glass. I left it there, a challenge and an invitation, a symbol of a choice yet to be made. From my briefcase, I withdrew 2 documents. They were printed on heavy cream-colored linen paper, the same kind I had used for the letter he never read. But these were not letters, they were contracts. I slid them across the table. They came to a stop directly in front of his trembling hands. These are for you, I said. He stared at them. The top sheet had a single, bold line of text centered on the page. a public apology. Below it, the page was blank, save for a single black line at the bottom with his name, Graham Porter. Typed beneath it. The first document is a confession, I explained, my voice as neutral as a lawyer's. It is a blank page, Dad, because the words of the apology must be your own. You will write them here tonight, and you will sign it, and you will read it aloud to the same people who heard your toast. His eyes widened in horror. This was not a private reckoning, this was a public reversal, a formal retraction of his power. The second document, I continued, gesturing to the paper beneath the first, is a commitment. He shakily lifted the first page to see the second. The title was just as stark, Patron Commitment to the Elena Duval Memorial Scholarship. This is a legally binding pledge, I said. It commits you, Graham Porter, to an annual contribution to my mother's scholarship fund. It commits you to being a public, named patron of her legacy. It is your chance to stop hiding behind your silence and start building something in her name. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table, my gaze locking with his. Now came the terms of the surrender. You have a choice. It's the first real choice I have ever given you. There are two paths, and they diverge from this exact moment at this table. Path 1, you sign nothing. You push these papers back across the table. If you do that, I will stand up. I will walk out that door, and I will never speak to you again. I will legally change my last name to Duval as of tonight. I will no longer be a Porter. My aunt gasped, a small, strangled sound. My father flinched, as if I had thrown the water in his face. Path 2, I continued, my voice unwavering, is that you pick up the pen, you write what needs to be written, you sign what needs to be signed, you do the one thing you have never done, you take public accountability for your actions. If you sign, we begin. We don't go back to the way things were. That is gone forever. But we begin the long, difficult process of building something new, something honest, in its place. The choice is yours. There are no other options. There is no negotiation. The ultimatum landed in the silent room, with the force of a physical blow. I had just laid a drawn sword on the table between us. He looked around, his eyes darting from face to face. He was searching for an exit, searching for an ally. He looked at his sister, my aunt, but she stared down at her hands, offering him nothing. He looked at his brother-in-law, who simply shook his head, a slow, sad gesture of defeat. He looked at Walt, his oldest friend, the man who had been his witness for 40 years, and Walt just looked back at him, his expression one of profound, weary disappointment. He looked at Lorraine, the woman who had seen his secret heart, and her eyes were filled with tears, but also with an unyielding strength. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. There is no escape this time. There was no crowd to hide behind. The nervous laughter was gone. The silent enablers had been silenced. He was alone on an island, with only my terms for a bridge back to the mainland. His gaze returned to the papers, then to me. His voice was a weak, broken thing, a pale imitation of the roar he had unleashed just moments before. It was the voice of a man trying one last, desperate gambit, clinging to the wreckage of the old world. If I sign, he began, his voice cracking, if I sign, did you still get rid of the truck? The question was a profound, staggering revelation, even here at the absolute nadir. After everything had been exposed, his mind was still snagged on the asset, the possession, the $60,000 machine. He was still wondering if this was all an elaborate, cruel negotiation to get the truck back into his hands. I didn't feel anger. I felt a vast, tectonic sadness. He truly, fundamentally did not understand. The truck is gone, Dad, I said, and my voice was soft, but absolutely final. It ceased to be a truck the moment you raised that glass. It has been transmuted. It is now the Elena Duval Memorial Scholarship. It's an opportunity. It is already doing more good than it ever could have sitting in your driveway. I leaned forward again, my voice dropping, becoming more personal, more direct. That truck was my way of trying to get you to a new place. You refused to take the ride, so now the value of that truck will help other young women get to the places they need to go. Places I had to get to all by myself. You can't have the truck, Dad, but you have the chance right now to get on the board of the foundation that truck created. You have a chance to help. He stared at me, the last of his transactional hope dying in his eyes. He was truly, finally at the end of all his roads. Walt, seeing his friend adrift, reached out and put a large, heavy hand on his shoulder. Graham, he said, his voice a low, gentle rumble. For God's sake, for Elena's sake, for your own sake, don't choose the silence again, old friend. It's cost you enough. Lorraine took a step forward, her hand resting on the back of his other shoulder. He was now held between his past and his future. Graham, my love, she whispered, her voice thick with tears. She has won. The truth has won. Let her have this. Let her win this one right now so that this entire family can finally win. Her words were the key. So the whole family can win. It was the permission he needed to reframe his surrender. This wasn't a defeat, it was a sacrifice for the greater good, a path to a strange, painful, but honorable peace. He looked down at the blank page. He looked at the pen I had placed beside it. He looked at my face, my unyielding, waiting face. A single tear, the first I had ever seen him shed, escaped his eye and traced a path through the weathered lines of his cheek. His hand, shaking so badly he could barely control it, reached for the pen. He uncapped it. The small click was like a gavel falling. He bent over the paper, his shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs. He began to write. The scratching of the nib on the heavy paper was the only sound. He wrote one sentence, then another. When he was done, he picked up the pen, his hand still trembling, and he signed his name on the line. He pushed the paper toward me. I did not read it yet. He picked up the pen again and signed the second document, the patron commitment. He did not hesitate. Then he put the pen down. He slowly, painfully raised his head. His eyes, red-rimmed and full of a grief that was 22 years old, met mine. His voice was a choked, ragged whisper, the sound of a stone wall finally crumbling to dust. I'm sorry, Kira. I did not cry. My tears had been spent a week ago in a dark car by a cold lake. What I felt now was not sadness or even victory, but a profound, somber sense of order being restored. The scales, so unbalanced for so long, were finally being leveled. I picked up the first sheet of paper, the one titled A Public Apology. His handwriting, usually so neat and precise, was a jagged, broken scroll. The ink was slightly smeared in one corner, evidence of the tear I had seen fall. I stood up. I held the paper in both hands like a proclamation. And in a clear, steady voice, I read his confession to the silent room. I, Graham Porter, I began, my voice ringing with a formal, almost legal clarity, am sorry. I was cruel to my daughter, Kira, and I was wrong. My words at my birthday dinner were an act of cowardice and pride. There is no excuse for the pain I caused her. I was ashamed of my own feelings, and I chose to hurt her instead of being honest. For this, and for the years of silence that came before it, I am truly and deeply sorry. Each word was a hammer blow, striking the silence, nailing the truth to the wall for all to see. My aunt was openly weeping now, her face in her hands. Walt had his head bowed, his shoulders shaking. My father did not look up. He simply sat there, absorbing the weight of his own words, now made real by my voice. When I finished, I placed the paper gently on the table. It was done. The lie was dead. I looked at the second document, the patron commitment, which he had already signed. I picked up my own pen, a simple blue ballpoint. The commitment here is for 1 year, I said, looking directly at him. But a legacy isn't built in a year. I drew a line through the words 1 year, and wrote above them in clear blue ink. 10 years. This is a 10-year commitment. Dad, a decade of honoring her memory. A decade of proving that your apology is more than just words on a page. I pushed the modified document and the blue pen back toward him. Initial here. He didn't hesitate. He took the pen and placed his jagged, trembling initials, GP, next to the amendment. He was no longer fighting. He was complying with the terms of his new reality. The moment his pen lifted from the paper, I pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen a few times and set it upright on the table, facing us. A moment later, a woman's face appeared. It was Susan, the director of the Tulsa Community Foundation, whom I had spoken with at length earlier in the week. Susan, thank you for taking my call, I said, my voice bright and professional. I have the new patron for the Elena Duval Memorial Scholarship here with me now. My father, Graham Porter. I turned the phone to face him. He looked up, startled, his face pale and tear-stained, suddenly broadcast into a world beyond our small, dark room. Mr. Porter, Susan said, her voice warm but businesslike. I want to thank you on behalf of the Foundation for your incredibly generous 10-year commitment. Your patronage will change the lives of many young women in this community. It's a wonderful way to honor Elena's memory. My father swallowed hard. He couldn't speak. He just managed a single, jerky nod. We have received his signed commitment, I said to Susan. Thank you. We'll be in touch tomorrow to finalize the transfer. I ended the call. The public act was complete. The commitment was now on the record. It was real. A sound broke the tension. It was Walt. He started clapping. It wasn't a celebratory sound, it was slow, rhythmic, and deeply respectful. Then Lorraine joined in, her hands meeting with a soft, steady beat. My aunt and uncle, their faces a mess of confusion and dawning understanding, began to clap as well. No one was smiling. It was the applause one gives at the end of a difficult, painful, but necessary performance. It was applause for the truth. I turned back to my father. I picked up the glass of water. The ice cubes were now mostly melted. I held it up. The clear liquid catching the dim light. This, I said, my voice soft now, for him alone. This is the toast I've been waiting for my entire life. I took a sip of the cool, clean water. He looked at me, his eyes full of a universe of regret. He shakily reached out and picked up his own water glass. He raised it, his hand trembling, to mirror mine. He opened his mouth as if to make a grand speech, to offer a rebuttal, to explain, but there was nothing left to say. He closed it. Instead, he just gave me the only 3 words I had ever truly wanted from him, the words his pride had held hostage for 34 years. I'm proud of you. The words landed, not with a crash, but with a quiet, profound sense of peace. The war was over. I nodded once, accepting his surrender. I accepted his words. I did not move to hug him. I would not cross that distance. That was a border he had to choose to cross himself. I stood my ground, giving him the space, the permission to close the gap he had created. For a long moment, he just sat there, looking at me as if trying to remember how to move. Then slowly, with the creaking, uncertain motion of a man unaccustomed to such gestures, he pushed his chair back and stood up. He took one step, then another. He walked around the corner of the table, his eyes never leaving mine. He stopped in front of me, a clumsy, broken old man, and then he wrapped his arms around me. It was not a smooth embrace, It was awkward and stiff, and he smelled faintly of old coffee and sorrow, but it was real. His arms, for the first time, were not a barrier. They were an embrace. I did not melt into it. I did not cry. I simply stood there. And for the first time, I let him hold me, and I held him back. The camera pulls back. Through the large window of the private room, we see the neon sign of Raldi's casting a red glow. Two figures are reflected in the glass, locked in an embrace. A man and a woman, a father and a daughter. The space between them, once a vast, unbridgeable chasm, was now finally closed. I never needed the truck. I never needed to buy his affection. I just needed to buy back my own voice. And tonight, I had purchased it, paid in full with the only currency that ever truly mattered, the truth. The screen fades to black. And if you'd like to help it reach more people, you can give it an extra boost by hitting the share button. Your support makes all the difference.